My name is Marianne Ellis. I'm 52 years old. And the strange thing about the moment you realize someone never loved you the way you hoped they did is that it doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives over a seating chart. Sometimes it arrives in the soft clink of a wine glass being set down too carefully. Sometimes it arrives when the man you plan to marry looks you straight in the eye and asks you to remove your own child from your wedding day. Victor said it like he was asking me to change the flowers. Calmly. Coldly. As if my daughter were a centerpiece that didn't match the room. She shouldn't come, he said. At first, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my mind refused to accept that he could possibly mean it. My daughter? I asked. Victor Hale didn't blink. Yes, Marianne. Emily. Emily. My only child. The girl I raised after losing her father. The girl whose hair I braided with shaking hands the morning after Daniel's funeral, because she still had school and I didn't know what else to do except keep breathing. The girl who cried herself to sleep against my shoulder for months and then slowly, painfully, learned how to laugh again. Emily was 26 now, engaged, gentle, brilliant, stubborn in the exact way her father had been. She was my world. And Victor wanted her gone. 3 years earlier, I had thought Victor was my second chance. I met him at a charity auction through a mutual friend. He was polished, handsome, well-dressed, the kind of man who knew how to hold a glass of wine and make everyone at the table feel like he belonged there. I had been alone for a long time by then. Daniel had died of cancer 9 years before. After he was gone, I didn't date. I couldn't. My whole life narrowed down to keeping Emily alive through her grief, and somehow keeping myself standing beside her. Then Emily grew up. She went to grad school, built a life, met Caleb, a software engineer with kind eyes and the rare ability to listen without waiting for his turn to speak. And I thought maybe I was allowed to want companionship again. Victor seemed safe. Looking back, loneliness can make red flags look like shadows. It started with little comments. Does Emily always call this often? She's an adult, Marianne. You don't have to solve every little problem for her. When I mentioned helping Emily with something, he would go quiet. When I talked about Daniel, his mouth would tighten. Once, he suggested I move the family photos from the living room because, as he put it, a house should make room for the future. I told myself he just didn't understand. Victor had never had children. He didn't know what it meant to love someone whose pain had once been small enough to fit in your lap. Then Emily got engaged. When she asked me to walk her down the aisle, I cried so hard she started crying too. "Mom," she whispered, laughing through tears, "you haven't even seen the dress yet." But all I could think was that Daniel should have been there. He should have seen our little girl become this woman. He should have walked on her other side. Victor's reaction was not joy. It was calculation. "Well," he said, "I hope this doesn't interfere with our wedding planning." Our wedding was set for October. Emily's wedding was in September, 1 month apart. To me, there was no conflict. To Victor, Emily's happiness had become competition. He complained about the money first. Years before Daniel got sick, he and I had started a wedding fund for Emily. It was never a question. That money was hers. $40,000 set aside for the day we hoped she would have. Victor knew that from the beginning. Our wedding budget was separate, $13,500, all paid by me, because Victor had gone through bankruptcy 4 years earlier and was still rebuilding. He contributed nothing financially, but somehow he had opinions about everything. "You're paying for her photographer, but we can't upgrade our venue? You spent more time talking about her flowers than ours. Your priorities are obvious." I swallowed more than I should have. Until that night. We were sitting at the kitchen table with the October seating chart spread between us. Victor had poured himself wine. I was moving little paper names around, trying to decide whether his mother should sit near the windows or closer to the dance floor. Then he set down his glass. "I've been thinking," he said. "Emily shouldn't come to our wedding." I stared at him. "She's my daughter. She doesn't respect us. She's giving a reading." "Then take her off the program." My hands went cold. "Victor, that's insane." His face hardened. "She competes with me for your attention. I won't have that energy on the most important day of my life." Not our life. His. I looked at him then. Really looked. At the man who had never once spoken Daniel's name without resentment. The man who smiled in public and tightened his jaw whenever Emily hugged me too long. The man who wanted a wife, but only if that wife came without history, grief, or a daughter she loved more than comfort. No, I said. Victor leaned back. It's her or me, Marianne. Choose. For one terrible second, the room went silent. Then I understood. He thought he had won. He thought I was afraid enough of being alone to betray my child. So I said quietly, I choose. His mouth curved into a small smile. I knew you'd. I choose Emily. The smile vanished. We're done, I said. He stared at me like I had slapped him. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Pack your things and get out of my house. He shouted. Then he cried. Then he accused me of never loving him. I didn't argue. I only repeated, get out. What Victor didn't know was that I had already been leaving him in my heart for 4 months. Because 4 months earlier, Emily had come to me in tears. She told me Victor had cornered her after a family dinner and said, once I marry your mother, things are going to change. She'll finally put her husband first. You need to start distancing yourself now or you're going to be disappointed. Emily hadn't wanted to tell me. She didn't want to ruin my wedding. My sweet girl was willing to suffer quietly so I could be happy. That was the moment I knew. I didn't confront Victor then. I started planning. I stopped making new deposits for October. I warned vendors there might be changes. I moved money carefully. I focused everything on Emily's September wedding. And I told my daughter one thing. When I walk you down that aisle, sweetheart, I'll be walking as a single woman. 2 weeks from now, I will walk my daughter down the aisle at the most beautiful wedding I can help give her. Victor still thinks our October wedding is only postponed. He still thinks this is a fight he can win. He has no idea that I already made my choice. And I will make it again every single time. The texts started the same night Victor left. At first, they almost sounded reasonable. I'm sorry, I was emotional. Can we please talk tomorrow? I stared at the message while sitting alone in my kitchen, surrounded by half-finished seating charts and untouched wine glasses. 3 years together, reduced to silence and paper scraps. For one weak moment, I almost answered. Then I remembered Emily crying in my car 4 months earlier, twisting tissues in her hands while trying to defend a man who had quietly threatened her relationship with her own mother. I locked my phone and went upstairs. The next morning, there were 6 more messages. You're overreacting. All couples fight. I didn't mean it like that. Your daughter has poisoned you against me. By evening, the tone shifted again. Fine, Emily can come, but maybe her role should be smaller. A guest. Not part of the ceremony. I actually laughed when I read that one. Not because it was funny. Because even now, Victor still thought the issue was negotiation. As if my daughter's place in my life could be bargained down like a catering package. Emily called me that night while Caleb drove them home from a cake tasting. You okay? She asked softly. I looked around the quiet house. Victor's shoes were gone from the hallway. His expensive jackets no longer hung near the front closet. The air itself felt lighter. I think, I said slowly, I forgot what peace felt like. There was silence on the line for a second. Then Emily whispered, I'm really proud of you, Mom. That nearly broke me. Because the truth was, part of me still felt embarrassed. Not for leaving Victor. For almost marrying him. You reach a certain age, and people assume you should know better. But grief changes the architecture of loneliness. After Daniel died, nights became enormous. There's no other way to explain it. Emily was 17 then, hurting in her own catastrophic way. I had to stay strong for her. So I buried everything sharp inside myself and kept moving. Work. Bills. College applications. Doctor appointments. Graduation. Life kept demanding motion. Then suddenly Emily was grown and building her own future. And I was left standing in a quiet house realizing I hadn't thought about my own happiness in years. Victor arrived during that emptiness. That's what scared me most. Not that he manipulated me. That part was obvious now. What scared me was how badly I had wanted someone beside me. 3 days after he moved out, he came back for the jewelry box. At least, that was the excuse. He texted first. "I'm coming Saturday morning for the vintage jewelry box my grandmother gave me." I replied with exactly one sentence. "I'll leave it on the porch. Don't ring the bell." Saturday morning arrived gray and humid. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang anyway. Then came knocking. Hard. Impatient. I opened the door with the chain still latched. Victor stood there, dressed like we were going to brunch together instead of ending an engagement. Dark jeans, button-down shirt, designer sunglasses pushed into his hair. He'd even worn the cologne I once told him reminded me of cedarwood after rain. Manipulation wrapped in expensive packaging. "We need to talk," he said immediately. "No," I replied. "You need to take your jewelry box and leave." He glanced toward the porch table, but made no move toward it. "You're seriously throwing away 3 years over one argument?" "It wasn't one argument." His jaw tightened. "Marianne, it was years of resentment toward my daughter. The ultimatum was just the final straw." "That's not fair." "Really? You always make me the villain whenever Emily's involved." I stared at him in disbelief. "Because you keep trying to compete with her." "I never competed with her. You told her to distance herself from me." His face changed instantly. Just for a second. A flicker.
Panic.
Then anger. She lied. The certainty in his voice would have sounded convincing if I hadn't spent 26 years learning every expression my daughter makes when she's hurt. She's not a liar. She's jealous of me. I almost pitied him then. Almost. Because imagine being so emotionally hollow that you interpret a daughter loving her mother as jealousy. "That's enough," I said quietly. Victor stepped closer to the door. "You're making a mistake." "No," I answered. "I made the mistake 3 years ago. I'm correcting it now." His eyes hardened. "You know what your problem is, Marianne? You're obsessed with the past." The words landed exactly where he intended. Daniel. The photos. The stories. The life I still carried. Victor always hated how grief survives love. As if widows are supposed to erase history to make new people comfortable. "You don't get to speak about my husband," I said softly. His expression shifted again. Maybe he realized he had pushed too far. Maybe he remembered too late that Daniel wasn't some abstract memory to me. He was the father of my child. The man who held my hand through 18 hours of labor. The man who painted Emily's nursery pale yellow because we couldn't agree on pink. The man who whispered apologies from a hospital bed because he was terrified of leaving us behind. Victor sighed dramatically. "I came here to fix things." "No," I said. "You came here because you thought I'd calm down eventually. That's what couples do. We're not a couple anymore." He stood there another few seconds before finally grabbing the jewelry box. Then, just before walking away, he said quietly, "You're going to end up alone." It should have hurt. Maybe months earlier, it would have. Instead, I looked at the empty driveway behind him and felt something terrifyingly close to relief. "I was alone after Daniel died," I said. "And somehow, I survived." Then I shut the door. He remained outside another 10 minutes. Knocking. Pleading. At one point, I think he cried. I stayed in the kitchen and let him. Eventually, his car disappeared. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next day, his sister called. I ignored it. Then came the voicemail. "You led him on for years, Marianne. Do you know how humiliated he is?" Humiliated. Interesting word. Not heartbroken. Not grieving. Humiliated. As if the true tragedy was that a man had been denied ownership. Victor's mother called next. A woman I had met exactly twice. She informed me I was cold-hearted and emotionally unstable. Apparently, Victor had told them I abandoned him unexpectedly. I deleted the voicemail halfway through. Then came the mutual friends. The worst kind of pressure isn't screaming. It's disappointment disguised as reason. Our mutual friend Celeste invited me to coffee under the pretense of concern. I knew exactly what it was before I even arrived. "Victor's devastated," she said carefully after we sat down. I stirred cream into my coffee. He'll survive. You really won't reconsider? No. Celeste sighed. I just think people say things when they're stressed. He told me to uninvite my daughter from my wedding. He didn't mean literally. He absolutely meant literally. She looked uncomfortable. Maybe therapy? I almost smiled. People love therapy when it allows them to avoid accountability. Celeste, I said gently, if someone tells you to choose between your partner and your child, that relationship is already dead. She looked down into her coffee. But he loves you. No, I said quietly. He loved access to me. That's not the same thing. After that conversation, I stopped explaining myself. The people who understood didn't need details. The people demanding details usually weren't interested in understanding anyway. Meanwhile, the important things continued. Emily's final dress fitting happened Thursday afternoon. The boutique was warm and smelled faintly like steamed fabric and roses. When she stepped out in the dress, my breath caught so hard I physically pressed a hand to my chest. She looked so much like Daniel in that moment, it almost hurt. Not because she resembled him physically, because she carried his gentleness, his softness, his quiet steadiness. You okay? Emily asked nervously. I nodded too fast. You're beautiful. Her eyes filled immediately. Oh no, she whispered. If you start crying, I'm starting crying. Too late. We both lost it. The poor seamstress pretended not to notice while discreetly handing us tissues. Later that evening, Caleb came over with takeout and spreadsheets for the seating arrangements. At one point, I watched him quietly wrap an arm around Emily while she argued passionately about table placements. He listened. Actually listened. No irritation. No competition. No resentment over how much she loved her family. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. Victor had trained me to see basic kindness as extraordinary. 1 week before the wedding, he escalated again. Tuesday morning, I walked into my regular coffee shop and immediately saw him sitting near the windows. My stomach dropped. He smiled like we were old lovers reconnecting by accident. What a coincidence, he said. It wasn't. Victor hated coffee. He only drank espresso because he thought regular coffee looked cheap. You need to leave, I said immediately. Can we at least be civil? We are not friends. He gestured toward the empty chair. Just sit for 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I did. Mostly because I was tired of being cornered in public. Victor leaned forward. I've been thinking. That sentence alone nearly made me stand back up. I overreacted about Emily. You think? I was insecure. I said nothing. She takes so much of your attention. There it is. He frowned. I'm trying to be honest. No, I replied. You're trying to sound reasonable. People nearby were starting to glance over. Victor lowered his voice. I just wanted to feel important to you. You were important to me. Not enough. And there it was. The real issue. Not Emily. Not the wedding. Victor could never tolerate being second to a bond built long before he arrived. I lost my husband, I said quietly. And my daughter almost lost both parents emotionally because I was drowning in grief. The two of us survived that together. If you expected to outrank that history, then you never understood me at all. He stared at me for several seconds. Then his face hardened again. You're going to regret this. I stood immediately. No, I said calmly. I think you're just angry because I finally see you clearly. 3 days before the wedding, Victor found out. Not the venue. Not the details. Just the date. Saturday. I still don't know exactly how he learned it. Maybe someone mentioned it casually. Maybe he saw something online. Maybe he had been quietly fishing information out of mutual friends for weeks. Whatever the reason, my phone rang at 9:14 Tuesday night while I was sitting at the dining room table finalizing place cards. Victor's name flashed across the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hello. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. I heard Emily's wedding is this weekend. I said nothing. He continued anyway. That's exciting. Still nothing. I was thinking, he said carefully, Since our wedding is postponed while we work through things, maybe this could be an opportunity. The words actually made my stomach turn. What opportunity? To show goodwill. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Victor, I could come with you. I blinked once. You want to attend my daughter's wedding? As your guest, he said quickly. People would see we're trying to repair things. It might help Emily understand I support her. The audacity was almost impressive. This man had demanded she be removed from our wedding entirely. Now he wanted to appear beside me at hers like some redeemed future stepfather. You are not invited, I said flatly. Silence. Then softer. Marianne, please. Number. Not Marianne. That voice was for waiters and charity donors and women he wanted to manipulate into forgiving him. I know I made mistakes, he continued. Let me fix this. You can't. I could apologize to Emily directly. You will not go near my daughter on her wedding day. I'm trying to make peace. No, I said quietly. You're trying to regain control. His breathing changed. Small. Sharp. Dangerous. You're being cruel. I almost laughed. Cruel. Interesting how boundaries suddenly become cruelty when they inconvenience the wrong person. This conversation is over. Then came the pivot. The real Victor. Coldness slid into his voice like a knife being unsheathed. You know, he said slowly, people in this town talk. I became very still. My business survived in this community for 30 years before I met you, I replied calmly. That's not what I mean. Of course it wasn't. Victor volunteered at the country club, sat on charity boards, attended every fundraising gala within 50 miles. He collected influence the way some people collect watches. And now he was reminding me of it. It would be unfortunate, he continued softly, if people heard a very ugly version of why our wedding ended. I looked down at the seating cards spread across my table. Emily and Caleb. Table 1. Near the windows overlooking the vineyard. Perfect placement for sunset. You threatened my daughter, I said quietly. I did no such thing. There were witnesses at that dinner, Victor. More than you realized. Silence. Not denial this time. Just silence. You weren't as subtle as you thought. His voice sharpened immediately. You're really willing to destroy everything over this girl? The second the words left his mouth, something inside me hardened permanently. This girl. Not Emily. Not your daughter. This girl. She's my child, I said, and this conversation is finished. You'll regret humiliating me. No, I answered softly. I'll regret not ending this sooner. Then I hung up. For several seconds, I just sat there staring at the phone. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and rain tapping faintly against the kitchen windows. Then my hands started shaking. Not because I was afraid of Victor. Because I was angry at myself for still reacting to him. That's the thing about manipulative people. Even after you see them clearly, your nervous system remembers the old version. The charming version. The apologetic version. The man who once held your hand while grocery shopping and kissed your forehead while you cooked dinner. Your body struggles to accept that both versions were always the same person. I called my lawyer the next morning. $400 for a consultation. Worth every penny. His office smelled like leather and coffee and old books. I handed him printed screenshots of every text Victor had sent over the last 2 weeks. The apology swings. The emotional manipulation. The threats. The coffee shop ambush. The phone call. The lawyer read quietly for several minutes. Finally, he removed his glasses. Document everything, he said. Do you think he'll actually do something? Probably not legally, he answered. This sounds more like emotional retaliation than actionable behavior. I exhaled slowly. But men like this don't enjoy losing publicly. That sentence stayed with me. Men like this. Not evil masterminds. Not movie villains. Just deeply insecure people who treat relationships like ownership. What if he spreads lies? I asked. The lawyer shrugged lightly. Defamation requires proof of damages, but honestly, Reputation usually survives gossip when people already know your character. That part mattered, because Victor underestimated something important. Roots. I had roots here. Real ones. I had fixed school fundraiser heating systems for free during winter storms. I had donated equipment to the high school theater department. I had spent years building relationships that weren't based on appearances or social climbing. Victor knew people. I knew community. There's a difference. By Thursday morning, wedding week swallowed everything else. The final venue walkthrough happened under clear blue skies. The vineyard looked like something out of a painting. Rows of green vines stretched across rolling hills, while workers adjusted fairy lights beneath the restored barn rafters. Emily stood beside me, holding a clipboard and trying very hard not to cry every 5 minutes. "Mom," she whispered at one point, "this is exactly how I imagined it." That alone made every dollar worth it. Every stressful conversation. Every difficult choice. Every ending. Inside the barn, the florist tested arrangements of wildflowers and white roses. Outside, the ceremony chairs were being aligned beneath the massive oak tree where Emily and Caleb would exchange vows. The quartet practiced softly in the background. For one perfect moment, everything felt peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. "Victor." Again. I stared at the screen until Emily noticed. Her face fell immediately. "Is it him?" I nodded once. Guilt flashed across her expression. That broke my heart more than anything. Even now, she thought she was somehow causing this. I took her hand gently. "None of this is your fault." "I know," she whispered automatically. But I could tell she didn't fully believe it. Children carry blame so easily, especially kind children. I squeezed her fingers. "Listen to me carefully," I said softly. "The best thing I ever did was choosing you." Her eyes filled instantly. "Mom." "And if I had married someone who made you feel unwelcome in your own family," my throat tightened, "I would have failed both you and your father." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She laughed weakly while wiping them away. "We are really ruining this florist setup with emotional instability." I laughed too. Then I silenced Victor's call without answering. That evening was the rehearsal dinner. Small. Warm. Held at a candlelit Italian restaurant overlooking the river. Caleb's parents were lovely people. Quiet, affectionate, deeply normal in the most comforting way possible. At one point, Caleb's mother leaned toward me and said softly, "You raised an extraordinary daughter." I nearly cried into my wine. Because sometimes the greatest compliment in the world is hearing someone recognize goodness in your child. Halfway through dinner, Emily stood to make a toast. Her hands shook slightly around the champagne glass. "I just want to thank my mom," she said. Instantly, my chest tightened. She's been my safe place my whole life. Nope, absolutely not. I was already crying. The whole table laughed softly while I grabbed tissues. Emily smiled through tears. "After Dad died, I know it would have been easier for her to fall apart, but she never let me feel alone. Not once." I looked down immediately because otherwise I would have completely lost control. "She taught me what love looks like," Emily continued quietly. "Real love. The kind that protects people instead of controlling them." The room went very still. Not everyone understood the full meaning behind that sentence. But I did. And somewhere deep inside myself, I think Daniel did too. After dinner, as we walked outside beneath the string lights along the riverfront, Caleb wrapped an arm around Emily while she leaned against his shoulder, laughing softly about something. I watched them from several steps behind. Young. Hopeful. Safe. And suddenly, I realized something. Victor had never actually threatened my happiness. He had threatened my peace. There's a difference. Happiness comes and goes. Peace is sacred. And I was finally ready to protect mine. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in gold sunlight. The kind of soft September morning that feels almost too beautiful to be real. I woke before my alarm. For several seconds, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet house around me. Then, it hit me. My daughter was getting married today. Emotion rushed through me so suddenly, I had to sit upright and press a hand against my chest. Daniel should have been here. That thought came first. Not in a painful way anymore. Just true. There are some absences that never stop existing. You simply learn how to carry them without collapsing underneath the weight. I showered, dressed slowly, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than necessary. Maybe suit. Pearl earrings. The bracelet Daniel gave me on our 15th anniversary. For a moment, I caught my own reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because I looked different, because I looked lighter. Outside, the weather was perfect. 72 degrees. Partly cloudy. A breeze soft enough to move the vineyard leaves without disturbing the flowers. By the time I arrived at the venue, staff members were already rushing around with clipboards and coffee cups. Inside the bridal suite, Emily sat in front of a mirror while two makeup artists buzzed around her. Then she turned toward me, and I completely lost it. Not graceful tears. Not cinematic tears. Ugly crying. Immediate. Violent. The kind where your entire face collapses at once. Mom, Emily laughed through her own tears. You are going to destroy my makeup before I even put the dress on. I can't help it, I choked out. Because she was breathtaking. Not just beautiful. Radiant. She wore part of Daniel's handkerchief sewn carefully inside the dress lining near her heart. Something old. Something loved. Something that belonged to her father. I wish Dad could see this, she whispered quietly once the makeup artist stepped away. The room softened around us. I walked over slowly and took her face in my hands. He can, I said. Her eyes filled immediately. And for one impossible second, I swear the room felt warmer. Like grief itself had stepped aside long enough to let joy breathe. The ceremony started at 4. Guests gathered beneath the massive oak tree, while sunlight filtered through the branches in ribbons of gold. The quartet began to play. And suddenly, it was time. Emily slipped her arm through mine. Her hand trembled slightly. So, does this count as emotional torture? She whispered nervously. I laughed softly through tears. Absolutely. Then the music swelled. And we walked. I will remember that walk for the rest of my life. The sound of gravel beneath our shoes. The way the sunlight caught Emily's veil. The exact moment Caleb saw her. His entire face changed. Not performative emotion. Not exaggerated. Pure love. Pure awe. Like the world had narrowed down to one person approaching him beneath an oak tree. Halfway down the aisle, Emily squeezed my hand. Dad would be proud of you, she whispered. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Because if I had opened my mouth, I would have shattered completely. When I placed her hand into Caleb's, something inside me settled peacefully for the first time in years. Not loss. Not sadness. Completion. The ceremony itself was perfect. Their vows were handwritten. Real. Messy. Human. Caleb promised to love Emily, even during the versions of herself she struggled to love. Emily promised to protect the softness in him, no matter how hard the world became. By the end, half the guests were crying, including me. Obviously. Afterward came dinner, music, speeches, and the kind of warm, joyful chaos that only exists at truly happy weddings. String lights glowed across the barn rafters, while glasses clinked and laughter bounced against old wood beams. At sunset, the vineyard looked dipped in honey. Then came my speech. I had rewritten it 11 times. None of the drafts felt good enough. When I stood and took the microphone, my hands shook so badly I thought I might actually drop it. Emily looked up at me from beside Caleb, smiling. Daniel's smile again. God, that smile. I took a breath. When Emily was born, I began. Her father cried harder than she did. The room laughed softly. I smiled too. Daniel held her like she was something sacred. And honestly, she was. My voice cracked almost immediately. I heard sniffles around the room. I spent 26 years watching this incredible human being grow into someone kinder, stronger, and more loving than I ever could have imagined. Emily was already crying openly now. So today isn't just about gaining a son-in-law, I continued. It's about witnessing the beginning of a marriage built on gentleness, respect, and real partnership. I looked directly at Caleb. Take care of her heart. It's the most precious thing I have ever known. Caleb nodded, with tears in his eyes. So will yours, he answered quietly. That nearly destroyed me. By the end of the speech, people were openly wiping their faces. I sat down shaking, while Emily leaned over to hug me tightly. You survived, she whispered. Barely. The reception blurred beautifully after that. Dancing.
Champagne. Laughter.
Caleb's college friends attempting something deeply unsafe near the dance floor. For several precious hours, life felt uncomplicated again. Then my phone started vibrating. Over and over. At first, I ignored it. I was in the middle of the father-daughter dance. Well, mother-daughter dance. Though, honestly, after all these years, it felt like both. Emily rested her head briefly against my shoulder while we swayed beneath glowing lights. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For choosing me. That hit harder than anything else all day. Children should never have to wonder if they'll be chosen. Never. I held her tighter. Always, I whispered back. My phone buzzed again. And again. By the time the dance ended, there were 23 notifications. Most from Victor. The first read, "Whose wedding is this?" Then, "Why are you in a suit walking someone down the aisle?" Then, "Is that Emily?" And finally, "I thought you were busy planning our wedding." I stared at the screen for 3 full seconds before bursting into shocked laughter. Emily noticed immediately. What? I handed her the phone. She read the messages once, then doubled over laughing so hard she snorted champagne. Actual champagne snort. Caleb nearly fell out of his chair laughing too. Oh my God, Emily gasped. He thinks you secretly got married. I think he thinks I planned another wedding behind his back. You did, Caleb pointed out helpfully. Emily smacked his shoulder while laughing harder. For the first time in weeks, Victor felt ridiculous instead of frightening. Small.
Petty.
Pathetic, even. Because standing inside that glowing barn, surrounded by love, he suddenly seemed so far away from our real lives. Still, the messages kept coming. From Victor's brother. From his mother. From mutual friends. Apparently, social media had done its work quickly. Photos of the ceremony spread across Instagram within minutes. Me walking Emily down the aisle. Emily dancing with Caleb. The sunset over the vineyard. People immediately assumed the wedding drama involved Victor somehow. By the end of the night, rumors were already mutating. I ignored all of it. Because I was too busy watching my daughter glow beneath string lights, while the man she loved looked at her like she hung the stars themselves. That was reality. Everything else was noise. Later, after the sparkler send-off, after Emily and Caleb drove away in their decorated car while guests cheered into the night air, I finally sat alone for the first time all day.
Exhausted.
Happy.
Emotionally wrecked.
I opened the messages. Victor had gone completely ballistic. You lied to me. You humiliated me publicly. Everyone thinks I'm an idiot. You were secretly planning this, instead of fixing our relationship. The wording told me everything. Not heartbreak.
Embarrassment.
Control lost publicly. That was the wound. Not me. Certainly not love. Just humiliation. His final message was the longest. 3 full paragraphs accusing me of betrayal. I read it once, then calmly typed a response. For clarification, today was my daughter Emily's wedding. The wedding I have helped plan for months, using money her father and I set aside years ago. Our October wedding was canceled after you demanded I remove my only child from it. There was never any confusion. You gave me an ultimatum. I chose my daughter. I will choose her every single time. Please stop contacting me. Then I copied everyone who had inserted themselves into the situation and hit send. Silence followed almost immediately. Not peace yet, but the beginning of it. Sunday morning, I woke up on my back porch with coffee warming my hands while sunrise painted the sky pale orange. The house was quiet again. But not lonely. Never lonely. Emily texted me from the airport before boarding their flight to Portugal. "Thank you for the best day of my life. Dad would be proud of you." I cried into my coffee like an idiot. Then I walked back inside and looked around my living room. At the family photos Victor always hated. The ones with Daniel smiling beside me. The ones with little Emily missing front teeth. The life Victor kept trying to push aside to make room for himself. Slowly, carefully, I moved every single photo back to where it belonged.
Front and center.
Exactly where they should have always stayed. Some people think love means choosing a partner above everyone else. They're wrong. Real love never asks you to betray your child to prove devotion. Victor thought I was afraid of being alone. But I've already survived the worst loneliness life can offer. I buried the love of my life. I raised a grieving daughter while carrying my own heartbreak like broken glass inside my chest. And somehow, we still built something beautiful afterward. So no. I wasn't afraid of losing Victor. I was afraid of losing myself. Thankfully, I found myself again before it was too late. And now, my daughter is happy. My heart is peaceful. And for the first time in years, that feels more than enough. 3 weeks later, I filed for separation. Daniel still hadn't believed I would do it. Even after everything. Even after the threats, the accusations, the children being dragged into emotional warfare. Part of him still thought this would end the way every previous conflict had ended. Rachel apologizes. Rachel softens. Rachel comes back. Instead, a process server handed him papers at work on a Wednesday afternoon. He called me screaming before he even reached his car. "You humiliated me!" I held the phone away from my ear until he stopped shouting. "I didn't choose where you were served. You're destroying our family over coffee!" The irony almost made me laugh. "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed it when honesty became optional for you, but mandatory for me." He hung up on me. That night, he slept at his mother's house. Then came financial discovery. And that was when the entire platonic friendship narrative finally started collapsing under the weight of receipts. My attorney called me on a Friday morning. "Rachel," she said carefully, "I need you to look at some statements." There were restaurant charges first. Expensive ones. Steakhouses. Wine bars. Private rooftop dining. Then spa charges. A resort outside the city. $400 labeled as a couple's package. My stomach turned slowly while I scrolled. Daniel and I had argued 3 months earlier over replacing our leaking dishwasher because he claimed money was tight. Meanwhile, he was spending hundreds on Vanessa. Using our shared accounts. Our shared life. I sat in silence while my attorney continued. There's more. Hotel charges. One in particular stood out immediately. A boutique hotel 45 minutes outside the city. The same night Daniel told me he had an overnight pharmaceutical conference. I stopped breathing for a second. Not dramatically. Just physically forgot. Because betrayal is strange. Even when you suspect it, proof still feels like being shoved underwater. "I need a minute," I whispered. "Take your time." I stared at the charge until the numbers blurred. All those speeches about maturity.
Trust. Controlling behavior.
And the entire time he had already been crossing lines he accused me of imagining. My attorney spoke carefully. These expenses matter legally because they may qualify as dissipation of marital assets. I almost laughed at the coldness of legal language.
Dissipation.
Such a sterile word for emotional demolition. "Did he admit anything yet?" she asked. "No. He probably will eventually." But Daniel didn't confess first. Vanessa's husband did. His name was Michael Hale. He called me unexpectedly 2 days later. His voice sounded hollow. Like someone speaking from inside a collapsed building. "I think our partners have been lying to us." I sat very still on the couch while the kids watched cartoons upstairs. "What did you find?" "A hotel receipt," he said immediately. "And messages." My throat tightened. Messages? They deleted most of them, but not fast enough. The room felt suddenly too small. Michael exhaled shakily. "This isn't the first time Vanessa's done something like this emotionally, but I think your boyfriend pushed it further." I closed my eyes. Of course, Daniel had painted himself as the emotionally trapped victim. He loved narratives where he was misunderstood and irresistible at the same time. "What exactly did you find?" I asked quietly. Michael hesitated. Then, "They booked 2 rooms, but according to the hotel records, only 1 was used." I felt physically ill. Not because I needed graphic details. Because suddenly, every moment replayed differently. The smiles after coffee. The secretive phone turns. The emotional distance. The accusations toward me. People drowning in guilt often become obsessed with controlling suspicion around them. Now I understood why Daniel reacted so violently to Caleb.
Projection.
Pure projection. Michael spoke again. "I'm sorry. The strange thing was, he sounded sincere. More sincere than Daniel had sounded in months." "I'm sorry too," I replied. And I meant it. Because both of us had been manipulated into defending people who were already halfway out the door emotionally. Mediation happened the following Tuesday. Daniel looked exhausted when he walked into the conference room. Older somehow. Fear does that to people, especially when the image they built of themselves starts collapsing publicly. Vanessa wasn't there, obviously, but her existence sat in the room with us anyway. My attorney laid out the financial statements carefully. Restaurant charges, spa receipts, hotel bookings. Daniel's lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable the longer the stack became. Finally, my attorney asked calmly, "Would you like to explain these expenses?" Daniel swallowed hard. "They were just dinners." "With your ex-girlfriend?" "Yes." My attorney nodded slowly. "And the couple's massage package?" Silence. Daniel's lawyer pinched the bridge of her nose. "It was a misunderstanding," Daniel muttered. "A misunderstanding involving a joint spa package?" His face flushed deep red. I watched him carefully. Part of me expected rage.
Manipulation.
Another speech about control. Instead, I saw something worse. Shame. Real shame. Not because he cheated. Because he got caught. Then came the hotel. My attorney slid the receipt across the table. "You told Ms. Mercer you were attending a work conference that evening." Daniel stared at the paper, like it might disappear if he looked hard enough. "I can explain." That sentence. God. People always think explanation changes betrayal. It doesn't. It only changes how long the betrayal lasted. "Were you at the hotel with Vanessa Hale?" my attorney asked. Daniel's eyes filled with tears instantly. And suddenly I realized something important. He genuinely never expected consequences. Not real ones. He thought he could frame every concern as insecurity forever. He thought language itself could protect him from accountability. "Yes," he whispered finally. The room went silent. My attorney nodded once. "And was the relationship physical?" Daniel buried his face in his hands. "Yes." The word barely came out. But it shattered 11 years anyway. I thought I would scream.
Cry. Collapse.
Instead, I felt strangely calm. Like my nervous system had already completed the grieving process weeks earlier. Daniel looked at me desperately. "Rachel." I held up one hand. "No." His voice cracked. "I never meant for this to happen." I stared at him for a very long time. Then I answered honestly, "I think you absolutely did. You just never thought you'd lose anything over it." That hit him harder than yelling would have. Because it was true. The coffees were never innocent. The emotional framing was never accidental. He prepared the moral argument before he crossed the line, because some part of him already knew he planned to. And when I mirrored his own logic back to him, he panicked. Not because I betrayed him. Because suddenly, the rules applied to him, too. Daniel moved into Margaret's house 2 weeks later. The children split time evenly between us under temporary custody. 50-50. Painful, but fair. Our daughter asked one night if Daddy still loved me. I sat on the edge of her bed, struggling not to cry. "Yes," I told her honestly. "He does." "Then why can't we all stay together?" Because love without accountability eventually destroys trust. Because some people confuse freedom with entitlement. Because equality feels cruel to people who benefit from imbalance. But you cannot explain those things to an 8-year-old. So instead, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Sometimes adults hurt each other too much to stay healthy together." She cried quietly into my shoulder. And afterward, I cried too.
Alone.
In the bathroom where nobody could hear me. A month later, Caleb met me for coffee again. Same small cafe. Same rainy weather. Different version of me. "You okay?" he asked gently. I considered lying, then decided I was too tired for performance. "No," I admitted, "but I think I'm becoming someone stronger." Caleb smiled sadly. That usually starts painfully. I looked out the window at the rain sliding down the glass. Daniel still told people I was controlling. Margaret still defended him endlessly. Some mutual friends quietly disappeared from my life after choosing sides. But most people eventually saw the truth. Because stories about controlling partners stop sounding convincing when hotel receipts enter the conversation. And the strangest part? I never hated Vanessa. Not really. She was just the mirror, reflecting who Daniel already was. A man who wanted freedom without responsibility. Validation without honesty. Rules for everyone except himself. As for me, I'm not dating anyone. Not even close. Right now, my life revolves around lawyers, custody schedules, and rebuilding the parts of myself I abandoned to keep someone else comfortable. But for the first time in years, I trust my own instincts again. That matters more than romance. The house goes on the market next month. The divorce will probably finalize within 6 months. The children are adjusting slowly. And me? I finally understand something I wish I had learned years ago. People who constantly accuse others of being controlling are sometimes just terrified of hearing the word no themselves.